Hi, welcome. My name is Dale McCluskey, and on this video I'd like to discuss the issue of a pinpoint methodology. What does that represent when it comes to impacting a dog's decision-making process? And in my book called Mind and Body Kinetics, I discuss some of these interplays, the reason why certain models of training will be more successful than others based on the type of influence that is pivoting from the approach. And when I say about influence, what I'm talking about is corrective influence. And when you look at training being a intervention, and that it's a issue where the owner needs to change for change to happen, then it's very important as to what is promoting change through the type of methodology or approach that's being used by way of encouraging the owner's psychology to change, but more specifically, what is at work, what is actually impacting the dog's decision-making process. So, talking about, and I discussed the distinction between corrective influence and relational influence, and this is one of the real key points, the central themes of my system. So when you look at my videos and you see me, bringing influence, over a dog's mind by way of flexing the leash or my push-pull technique. Just from appearances, from initial, looking at it, you'll say, well, that looks like, Dale's correcting the dog, okay, and that's understandable by looking at that. But that's not what's really happening, okay. It's kind of a yes and no thing going on there, because what I'm focused on is dogs as relational beings. I'm looking at relational change. So, how the influence is happening is different. So if you really pay attention, you're going to see, because that's one of the observations, saying, well, the dog's not doing anything. Dale's correcting the dog isn't doing anything. So it's what I'm doing. It's how it's happening. It's proactive. Okay, I've already taken a snapshot, so to speak, relationally, like a three-dimensional view, and I know where I need to go. Okay, so the whole thing with understanding, when you look at, and that's why so many training systems fail, is because they really have no idea what the end game is. I mean, they're going through the motions of training. So when I talk about this whole issue about a physical response and relational disconnect, okay, it'll start to make sense. Why are you? I mean, you're doing a sit, a down, and a stay with the dog, but is that actually doing anything? And besides going through just the motions of something, the appearance of something, what impact is that having? And so when you get into the specifics, the precision of something. So when you look at, what I'm doing with, and this is where the whole issue of, what I call refer to as follower moments. I mean, that's the central theme in my system. So what I'm doing is I'm building off these moments. And as these moments build on top of each other, that's where the dog's overall decision-making process of the dog is being impacted. So, you have to be able to piece it all together. Otherwise, that's why people get, led astray when you talk about leadership and dominance and all these the physical force, because they're not looking through the relational lens, so to speak. They're looking at just the appearance of things. And so you have to be able to step out of the box and be able to, take a three-dimensional snapshot and understand, what is the end game? Because that's the question I ask. What is happening beyond appearances, and beyond that, if appearances don't line up, if they don't align, if the underlying motives don't line up, what's happening there? I'll tell you something. So many trainers in dogs can't figure it out because they're not looking through that lens. They're looking at the appearance. They're making certain assumptions that aren't always true. And again, I make a comparison to, if you look at the parenting model, it aligns almost perfectly. But then getting into the specifics, this is where you get into the methodology. So for example, is a training system could be using corrective influence but still not be creating the type of change that needs to happen. Because how I frame up influence, and I bring it into perfect alignment relationally. That's why I call it relational influence. It's happening at the moment that it needs to happen. I mean, that's key. So the influence is coming over the dog's mind at the moment it needs to happen. As the water levels are building, so to speak. So what I'm focused on is this whole issue of being objectified. Okay, that's the whole thing. So these interplays and getting a sense of this, it takes a real ability to see through this lens, see through the relational lens, and that's one of the things where you have to really let certain ideas go and start to look, step back and look at dogs as separate and apart from the ideology. And so again, the whole issue of follower moments, they are designed to be done the way I do them because it's specific. Okay, it's meaningful. Okay, that's the whole thing. When you see what I'm doing, everything has meaning in it. Every touch, every movement, every technique is all designed to impact the decision-making process of the dog. So everything has meaning. So when I'm doing it, it's not about running around pylons and going through the motions of things. It's about bringing it in a certain way into a certain type of way of doing things, approach that's going to be meaningful. Okay, so the whole thing with structure and how I incorporate that in, and with the follower script, follower moments, and the specificness of it, that's what really matters. So again, you can be using corrective influence, but still not be enough. Because there's a delay there. It's how it's happening. It's not focused relationally. It's going to be more meaningful, more successful than these learning-based ideologies that totally reject this whole relational side of things, because they're just so caught up in their own ideas of stuff they completely miss what I'm saying. So it will be more successful, but the whole thing is looking at the change that each individual dog owner needs to happen. Okay, that's why when you get into this whole thing about how people think, and even using treats and using all these different, it's a really bad idea, because the goal is to move the tachometer over. Then that's why I reject certain things, because they aren't helpful. I mean, they aren't gonna bring that needle over far enough, perhaps, to where it needs to go. So there is a balance here, but it's really understanding the power in the relational connection. And what does that represent? Those interplays, how that happens. It's really, really critical. So I'd really encourage you, if you want to understand this more of what I'm talking about, to really break it down, is my book. It's called Mind and Body Kinetics. I just released it. It does a really good job with comparing and contrasting the models. I actually show them side by side. I talk about this whole thing with relational and corrective influence. That's a real key central theme to understand what's going on there, and it'll help you make sense of learning-based ideology or methodology as to why it breaks down. So it's almost like a sliding scale. I show that, I discuss that, so you're able to get a better understanding, because there's if you're a real-world dog trainer, you're going to see certain contradictions and certain inconsistencies that say, okay, that doesn't make sense, that's not lining up. And I discuss that whole physical response and relational disconnect. That's a biggie too. That's a big deal to understand that, to get a sense of that, so that you start to be able to test that out and say, okay, maybe I get a sense of what's going on here. Is it, is change really happening, or is it not? So that's something that you have to get your head around. So, but this book, again, it really helps sort this out. So I'd really encourage you to check it out. Again, when you're thinking about training and this whole issue about leadership and the specifics of the methodology, it's really important. I mean, how I do things, it's all designed to follow a certain path for a reason. There's a basic formula for success that I follow. So anyway, just encourage you to check it out. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you have a good day.